Coming up on today's Next Fan Up podcast.
It just felt like almost like two mathematicians doing math problems against each other.
That's underselling it a little bit. It's the Super Bowl recap. Here we go.
That's how we start. Yeah, baby.
32 super fans.
Where do the reports come from? Did you get an initial?
One PodVader.
That's football.
Every angle of the NFL covered.
All that kind of stuff, I get it.
This,
no question about it,
is Next Fan Up.
We're going to unleash hell here in December.
Hello and welcome to the Superfan Super Bowl recap. Hey everybody, PodVader here. I'm going to step out of the way here in just a few seconds. I will be back at the end of Chiefs Nick giving his recap of the Kansas City Chiefs winning the Super Bowl 31-20 over the San Francisco 49ers. Our Eagles superfan James, who's on every podcast, was there to walk him through every step of the way. A few things I want to hit on at the end of it, plus some non-Super Bowl stuff too. So I hand it off.
Super Bowl 54 is in the books. The San Francisco 49ers fall to the Kansas City Chiefs in a very exciting game that basically went back and forth, 20-31 in favor of the Chiefs. I am James, your Eagles superfan, here with Nick, our Chiefs superfan. And Nick, thoughts, feelings, emotions. Pretty sure you ran through a gambit of things tonight watching this contest.
Oh man, it was truly crazy. I mean, I'm glad Neil asked me last week, just how I felt just being in the Super Bowl, because as a Chiefs fan, it's something I haven't experienced in my lifetime. Has not been something that's been experienced by any Chiefs fan for several years, more than a decade before my lifetime began, and just being there and experiencing the whole thing. Top to bottom was surreal. And honestly, I mean, I don't know what it is about this Chiefs team this year, but they just have a knack for, I don't know whether it's just playing possum for drama or, just needing some little bit of warm-up time throughout the game, but they sure added the drama. The Chiefs scored 10 points in the first three quarters, 21 in the fourth quarter. In order to win this game, and they needed that. I mean, it was they were playing dead for half of this game, and it wasn't all bad. I mean, it was getting us all here after two other performances where they'd also been emotional roller coasters, and all of us Chiefs fans, we've never gotten this far, and they set up another one for us. It was. The Chiefs went 3-and-out on their opening possession, and they got the ball first, which is very unusual. And it wasn't even like, normally, this is sort of the thing where you can blame on skill position players. Like Mahomes legit missed both throws that led to that 3-and-out. And there was a series of other things going wrong. Suddenly, I personally had been a bit dismissive of the idea that the 49ers could run the ball to victory against the Chiefs because, ultimately, yeah, sure. I mean, it's kind of strength against weakness. The Niners are very good at that. The Chiefs are not good at defending it. But as long as the Chiefs are scoring it the way they do, it kind of didn't matter. But this was shaping up to be a very low-scoring game, and the Niners were running the ball really well. The Chiefs were not defending it well. Niners go up, 10. I don't know, it was 10-0, but it ended up 10-10 at half, and and that felt like, okay, this is all balanced out. This is now. We're ready for the Chiefs to break out, because this is kind of how this script has gone this particular postseason.
Yeah, let's get to that first half a little bit. 10-10 at the half, I'm pretty sure is not on anyone's radar. I mean, unless you were playing some type of, square pool where you had 0 zeros. But
you picked the wrong square. I mean, analytically, if you won on this first half.
Right. But you mentioned the 3-and-out in the first possession. Mahomes missed. At least one of those two first targets was pretty much a gimme to get the first down, because the first carry was 8 yards basically, and you figure, all right, first down, move the chains. They're going to methodically dink and dunk this ball down the field. And I understand the first quarter is usually a feeling out period of these teams, but it felt like the first half was a feeling out period for both teams as far as what they felt they could and couldn't do and get away with. And we knew the Niners were going to come out and try to do something to limit the big plays, the explosive plays that your offense is known for, mainly not letting Tyreek Hill get deep. But other players did step up once you all found your rhythm. You scored a touchdown on the next possession, came back on the following possession after a turnover, ended up getting 3 points, in which I thought if the score goes 14-3, it might be over here. Speak a little bit about that as far as like the rhythm of the offense in the first half, particularly before we move into the second half and everything that happened there, because I felt is that it was more so jab, 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 no big blows yet. Just let's play this safe in the first half and not dig ourselves in a deep hole. How did you feel about that?
Well, I feel like this is always going to be kind of an interesting Super Bowl just because I feel like Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan are two coaches that achieve so much of their success just purely via scheme, purely via planning matchups, purely via, moving around the X's and O's, both pre-game in terms of their game plan and mid-game, in adjustments, that this is just going to end up being a weird game. I mean, this is not a game where you're talking about strength versus strength in terms of physical prowess. This is a game where you're talking about two of the best coached and best schemed offenses in the league. And I think what you saw was both sides really thinking their ways into various traps. And I think maybe sometimes outthinking themselves, but also just each side wanting to keep a few cards, close to their chest, and also just seeing what the other was going to do. And I mean, both game plans were frankly kind of fascinating. I mean, they put more on Garoppolo's shoulders than they had at any other point in the playoffs. The Chiefs were putting a high emphasis on passes to the running backs. Basically just putting the game on Damian Williams, a guy who typically doesn't get, much more than 15 touches per game. In an average Chiefs game. I mean, I think he probably gets less than 15 in most games. And this is a game where LaShawn McCoy was a healthy scratch, but they just like him as a scheme fit. And it was just they each had found what they thought were the things they wanted to attack schematically and the matchups they liked. And some of it was working, some of it wasn't, and they were just adjusting based on that. Like, oh, how do they adjust it? How do they deal with this? How do they deal with that? I think it was just like a lot of, it just felt like almost like, two mathematicians doing math problems against each other, like a big portion of the half. And there was smash mouth football happening and there were guys running into each other, but there was just so much of the scheme preparation you could see running into each other in the first half. And I think that's why it kind of came to a draw and why, we saw things start to break out in the second half.
Probably the most nerve-wracking part for you is the second quarter where the Niners outscore you 10-0, take this 20-10 lead. Up until this point, they're having basically moderate success running the ball and outflanking you on the outside. Deebo Samuel gets basically 3 carries for 53 yards on these gadget end arounds or jet sweeps. Mostert and Coleman are hitting their stride, popping off 5, 6, 7, 8-yard runs. Mahomes has probably the worst quarter that I've seen him play in a long time, throwing 2 interceptions. Yep. I can only imagine what you're going through, but you're looking at this, and the Niners pretty much getting everything because they actually do take one of those turnovers, go down and convert it into a touchdown after scoring 3 points on their opening possession. I mean, everything's looking the Niners' way. You feel you still have a quarter left before we even get to the fourth quarter, but just that third quarter in and of itself, like what did it look like the Chiefs were trying to do offensively? Because defensively, it didn't look like anything they were doing was working.
Yeah, it was brutal. And I should say that I was watching this from so there's a couple of Chief bars in New York City. I'm from Topeka, Kansas, but I live in Brooklyn now. And I normally watch these things at home, but it's like, okay, it's the Super Bowl. I have to be around a bunch of the Chiefs fans. for this thing. And so, I mean, this place was it was 100% Chiefs fans. And yeah, I mean, it was lively at times, but man, it was quiet in that third quarter. And part of it was not only that the things were going wrong. It was just that, I mean, like as you said, I think it was the worst quarter of Patrick Mahomes we've ever seen. And I honestly haven't seen him throw two picks quite like that. I mean, like one was off of Tyreek Hill's hands. That's not on him, really. I mean, that should have been a completed pass. But the other one was just bad. I mean, I've never seen him throw that bad of an interception. Because usually it's like, okay, either he's just trying something and the guy makes a play on the ball, or it's kind of an arm punt and it's like, let's just see what happens. But that was just like, dude, you didn't get it there, you know, and that's just so rare. I mean, and it goes to what a luxury Patrick Mahomes is as a quarterback and as a person to watch, because it was just like, it was bizarre. Like I honestly, it was like the first time I'd seen him just miss one and just throw it to a defender. And yeah, and it was the second one that I think was brutal, though, the one that was off of Tyreek's hands, because, you know, it was one of those things. I mean, I keep talking about how, okay, the run game can't beat us because we score on such a high percentage of our possessions. That only matters if you keep scoring on those possessions. And the Chiefs were in a position to respond. They were in a position to catch up on that drive that ended up in that last interception, because they were at that point, they were at the, you know, basically at the doorstep of the Niners. I think that was right around the 20-yard line, where it bounced off Tyreek's hands and into the arms of a Niners defender. And that's when it really felt like, okay, this may be a very sad story for us, because that actually was a long drive. It ate up a fair amount of clock. And it was the Chiefs sort of matching the style of the Niners and saying, okay, you know, we can do these long drives too. You're taking away the big plays, and that's fine. We're going to march down the field and we're going to, you know, score anyway. And instead they ate up, you know, almost 6 minutes of clock and then threw an interception, which is kind of the worst case scenario for you already trailing. And that's just kind of when, you know, when this game turned the corner, because that was the interception ended up happening with 11 minutes and 57 seconds in the fourth quarter. I mean, the fact that that's when that happened, that is why that felt like a nail in a coffin, because you're already down by 2 scores. It was 20-10 at that point. And you have just over 10 minutes of football left to play in the most important game of the year. And so it was hard to be optimistic at that point. But at the same time, it was like, well, this is not last year's team. This is finally a team that has some balance. This is finally a team where we can say, okay, defense, give it back to us. And amazingly, they did.
Yeah, they did. And, you know, up until this point, you know, if you're a Niners fan, they had to be pretty happy with the performance, because first 3 quarters, I'm looking at this, and especially in that third quarter, beginning of the fourth, before you all pretty much go on that 3-touchdown tear, the defensive ends are pretty much getting whatever they want against your offensive tackles. They didn't play much of a clean game. And, you know, surprising stat here, neither offensive line was called for holding at any point throughout the game. There probably were some questionable instances that you can nitpick with, but the officials pretty much let these offensive lines, you know, let both lines play, do their thing. But your tackles, Fisher and I'm trying to remember the guy on the other side, Ford. Yeah. I mean, these guys, Bosa and Buckner and even former player D Ford, you know, they're running by your tackles and pretty much meeting Mahomes at the drop back spot, and he's backpedaling on a lot of throws in the third quarter and beginning of the fourth. I mean, concern has to be there as far as the play of the offensive line up until this point.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big matchup to watch, I think, going into this game. I mean, it was something we talked a lot about in the preview of this. It was just, the Chiefs O-line, I think, had been sort of unheralded in that